The Vanguard plummeted through the thick, green atmosphere of Xeron, its hull groaning under the strain. The sky above was a tumultuous swirl of clouds, flashing with eerie, purple lightning, while below, jagged mountains rose like the bones of some ancient beast. Sergeant Alex Carter gritted his teeth as the ship rocked violently. "Brace for impact." The command came from Captain Reynolds, his voice strained but steady through the chaos. The last thing Alex saw before the world shattered around him was the alien landscape, strange, hostile, and wild. Then, the ship's systems failed, and everything went black. Alex's eyes snapped open to darkness. His body felt heavy, every inch of it aching. The sound of crackling fires and distant explosions filled the air. He groaned and pushed himself to a sitting position, blinking as his vision adjusted. The Vanguard was nothing but a twisted heap of metal and scorched steel. The crash had decimated most of the crew, leaving only a handful of survivors, their bodies strewn across the wreckage. "Report!" Alex barked, forcing himself to stand. His legs wobbled beneath him, but the adrenaline kicked in before the pain could settle. He couldn't afford to fall now. A voice crackled through his comms, raspy and weak. "Sergeant Carter, it's Miller. We've got survivors. A few of us, but they're coming." Alex didn't need to ask who they were. The Asleel. The moment they'd crossed into Xeron's orbit, the Asleel had launched an assault, wiping out the ship's defenses before even reaching the surface. It was clear they hadn't expected much resistance from humanity. They were wrong. "Stay where you are," Alex ordered. "I'm coming to you. Do not engage unless I say so." He glanced around, scanning the wreckage. A fire flickered nearby, consuming what was left of the cockpit, the flames casting strange shadows on the twisted metal. The air smelled of burnt electronics and singed flesh. Alex reached for his sidearm, fingers closing around the cool grip, and then, with a single steadying breath, he sprinted toward the wreckage's edge. The distance to Miller's position was short, but he knew the real threat was not the crash, it was what waited outside. The Asleel would be here soon, and they were not known for mercy. As he reached Miller's group, Alex surveyed the survivors. 3 men, 2 women, all battered and bloodied but alive. Miller was leaning against a jagged piece of debris, a tourniquet wrapped around his arm. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. "They're coming, Sergeant," Miller muttered, his voice shaking. "They're already here." Alex followed Miller's trembling hand to the horizon, where, in the distance, a line of massive silhouettes marched toward them. The Asleel were taller than men, armored in sleek black exoskeletons that glinted like obsidian. Their long arms hung at their sides, weapons in hand, devastatingly advanced, far beyond anything humans had encountered. Alex's heart pounded as he calculated the odds. He looked over at his team. "We're going to fight." Miller's eyes widened. "We're outgunned. Outmanned." "What the hell do you mean, fight?" Alex's jaw tightened. "You think we're just going to roll over and die? They think we're weak. They think we're easy prey. I'm not going to let them take us that easily." The words hung heavy in the air, filled with a bitter resolve. The Asleel were merciless. But Alex had learned something in the years of his service: humans didn't break. Not when their backs were against the wall. Alex turned to the group. "Gear up. We fight smart, not hard. We've got no choice but to survive, and we're going to make them regret underestimating us. Grab whatever weapons you can, and stay low." A muffled roar echoed in the distance, shaking the ground beneath their feet. It was the Asleel's war cry, a sound like the howl of a dying beast. "We don't have much time," Alex muttered. "Get ready to move." The team scattered, gathering any usable equipment from the wreckage. Alex's mind raced, calculating the best approach. His pulse hammered in his chest, but his hands were steady. Every fiber of his being focused on the mission ahead. He knew what they had to do: hit them before they hit them. And when they did, they needed to make it count. As he watched his team prepare, Alex's mind drifted for a moment to their faces, their fear, their hesitation. They were soldiers, but they were also human. And in the end, that was what the Asleel didn't understand, what humans could do when they were pushed to the edge. The first of the Asleel crested the ridge, their massive forms silhouetted against the burning sky. A faint wind carried the scent of sulfur and smoke. Alex's chest tightened. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. This was a battle for pride. For humanity's right to exist. He locked eyes with Miller, who nodded grimly, clutching his rifle. The fight for Earth began now. And Alex would make sure the Asleel never forgot the cost of underestimating humanity. The night was unnervingly quiet. The moon cast a ghostly glow over the alien terrain, making the jagged mountain ridges seem like the spines of ancient beasts, waiting to strike. The air smelled of burning wood and something metallic, like the remnants of their fallen ship. The fires from the wreckage still flickered in the distance, painting the sky with a sickly orange light. Sergeant Alex Carter crouched in the shadows, his eyes fixed on the distant Asleel encampment. The alien forces had made camp at the base of the mountain, just a few miles away from their position. It was their first night after the crash, and Alex knew that if they didn't act fast, they would be sitting ducks. "How long do we have?" Miller asked, his voice barely a whisper. The exhaustion was evident in his eyes, but the fire of survival still burned brightly within him. Alex took a deep breath, weighing his options. He could feel the tension coiling in his chest, the weight of the decision pressing down on him like 1,000 tons. His mind raced through the possibilities, calculating the risks and rewards. They needed supplies, weapons, and above all, intel. The Asleel were methodical, calculating, relentless. They wouldn't give up their position easily. "We don't have much time," Alex replied, scanning the horizon again. His eyes narrowed at the sight of their enemy. The Asleel had set up a perimeter, towering sentinels keeping watch over their forces. Their ships were parked in tight formation, shields glowing faintly in the moonlight. It was a fortress, but a vulnerable one. He could feel the weight of his team behind him. They were counting on him. "Any word from the others?" Alex asked, his voice betraying just a hint of concern. He had sent Lieutenant Harper and a small team to scout the perimeter hours ago. He hadn't heard from them since. Miller shook his head grimly. "Nothing, Sergeant. We need to act now. If we wait, they'll bring in reinforcements. This may be our only chance." Alex's jaw clenched. He was right. Time was slipping away, and their chances of survival dwindled with every passing moment. They couldn't afford to let the Asleel regroup. Not when they were still reeling from the shock of the crash. "All right," Alex said finally, his voice steady but cold with determination. "We move in fast, take out the outer sentries, and gather intel. We're not here for a fight, we're here to make them think twice before they come after us. We hit hard, hit fast, and then we vanish." Miller nodded, a grim smile flickering across his face. "Sounds like a plan." The others were already preparing, checking their weapons, adjusting their gear. Despite the odds, there was a quiet confidence in the air. They had survived the crash. They had survived the first attack. And they were going to survive this. The group set out under the cover of darkness, moving through the dense foliage with practiced stealth. The cold air cut through their clothing, the smell of alien plants and earth stinging their nostrils. Each of them was hyper-aware of the ground beneath their feet, the sound of every twig snapping underfoot. Alex led the way, staying low, eyes darting back and forth as he picked out the faint outlines of the Asleel sentries. They were hulking creatures, their exoskeletons glinting in the dim light, but they were not invulnerable. He had seen the weaknesses, noted them in the heat of battle. Now, he would use that knowledge to his advantage. As they neared the perimeter, Alex's heart beat a little faster. They were close now, close enough to strike. He could see the movement of the sentries, their unnatural grace as they patrolled the area, their weapons at the ready. 3 sentries ahead, Alex murmured. "Miller, you take the one on the left. Harper, you and I will handle the other 2. Miller acknowledged the plan with a nod, his eyes narrowing. "Understood." Alex's grip tightened on his rifle, the weight of it grounding him in the moment. His breath was steady, even though inside, the anticipation of the upcoming fight was electric. He could feel the pressure mounting. A wrong move, and they could all be dead. The team moved as one, an invisible force creeping closer to their prey. With each step, the tension thickened, the silence almost suffocating. Then, in a blur of motion, the attack came. Miller moved first, a shadow in the dark, taking out his target with a single, swift strike. The sentry crumpled silently to the ground. Harper and Alex followed suit, dispatching their targets with precision and speed. The Asleel didn't even have time to react before they were incapacitated. The area was still, save for the soft thudding of Alex's pulse in his ears. "We've got their intel," Alex whispered, scanning the fallen sentries for any useful data chips. He found one, slipped it into his pack, and motioned for the team to move. "We're done here," he said, though the satisfaction of a successful operation was short-lived. There was still much to be done. As they turned to leave, a distant howl of an Asleel war cry echoed through the night, a chilling reminder that the hunt had only just begun. The jungle was alive with sound, the rhythmic buzz of alien insects filling the air, the rustle of unseen creatures scuttling beneath the thick underbrush. The moonlight barely pierced the canopy above, leaving the world below bathed in shadows and whispers of unseen danger. But for Sergeant Alex Carter, the quiet was the worst of it. "Keep it tight," Alex whispered to his team, voice barely audible over the hum of the night. He could feel his pulse thrumming in his throat, an anxious anticipation coiling in his gut. The intel they'd stolen from the Asleel sentries earlier had led them here, to an abandoned research facility hidden deep within the jungle. What it held, Alex wasn't sure, but it was the only lead they had. His hand rested on the hilt of his knife, fingers rubbing the worn leather of the grip, and his mind raced with calculations. They had no idea how many Asleel were inside. The building could be empty, or it could be crawling with aliens preparing for their next strike. Either way, Alex knew this was their best shot. The squad had been moving for hours, careful to leave no trace. No more battles. Not yet. But they needed to know what the Asleel were planning. What kind of weaponry they had. What could turn the tide of this fight? Any signs of movement? Alex asked, glancing at Lieutenant Harper, who was leading the rear. Harper was a cool-headed veteran, someone Alex could rely on when the pressure mounted. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned the surrounding area. "Nothing," Harper replied quietly. "But I don't like how quiet it is. Feels like we're walking into a trap." Alex nodded. "That's exactly what they'd want us to think." Miller, who had been walking silently beside Alex, suddenly froze. His hand shot out to stop the squad behind him. His eyes locked on the structure ahead, and Alex's breath caught. The building was a decaying remnant of human ingenuity, steel beams and cracked glass windows, long abandoned by those who had once used it for research. Now, it was a foreign stronghold, a perfect place for the Asleel to gather their forces. "We're close," Miller murmured. His voice was tight with tension. "Ready?" Alex shot him a glance. The younger man's face was hard, determined, but his eyes betrayed the fear that none of them were allowed to voice. It was the same fear that had been gnawing at Alex's insides since the moment they crashed. The fear of facing an enemy that was beyond their understanding. Beyond their preparation. "Let's move," Alex said, his voice firm. Quietly. No mistakes. They closed the distance to the building without incident, crouching low as they approached the entrance, a large, rusted door with a security keypad long since rendered useless. Alex motioned for Miller to step forward, and he quickly began working with the lock, pulling out tools from his pack. The seconds stretched on, the only sound the frantic beating of Alex's heart. He could feel the weight of his team's eyes on him, the pressure building, as if this one moment could decide everything. The door creaked open with a long, drawn-out sound, echoing in the stillness. "Stay low, stay quiet," Alex ordered again, and they slipped inside. The air inside was cold, stale with years of abandonment. Dust settled in the corners, and the faint smell of decay lingered in the atmosphere. The only light came from the dying glow of emergency backup lamps, casting long shadows that stretched across broken floors and overturned tables. "Eyes up," Alex whispered, his voice low as they moved deeper into the building. The walls were lined with old research equipment, half buried under piles of debris. But there was no sign of life. Not yet. Suddenly, a low hum reverberated through the floor. It started softly, barely noticeable, but grew louder with each passing second. "What is that?" Harper asked, her voice laced with concern. Alex strained his ears, his instincts screaming that something was wrong. He looked to Miller, who was scanning the surroundings with narrowed eyes. "Something's powering up," he muttered. Before Alex could respond, the sound intensified, a mechanical whirring that echoed through the building. Then, all at once, the lights flickered to life. And the hum turned into a deafening roar. They froze. Ahead of them, in a darkened room at the end of the corridor, a massive structure loomed. Its surface was smooth, metallic, and alien. Pipes and cables snaked along its sides, feeding into the unknown depths of the facility. The hum, now a thundering vibration underfoot, emanated from this structure, making the floor tremble. Alex's mind raced, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. It was a weapon. Of that, he was certain. But it wasn't just any weapon. This was something else, something the Asleel were preparing for. "Get back," Alex hissed. He was already backing toward the exit, his hand motioning for the team to follow. "We need to." A sound erupted behind them, sharp and unmistakable, the hiss of a door opening. The team spun around, weapons drawn. From the shadows, the Asleel emerged. A dozen of them. The trap had been set. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he sprinted through the thick underbrush, the sound of Asleel footfalls echoing behind him. The jungle was alive, its twisted trees and dense foliage offering little cover as he and his team raced toward their objective. Every step felt like a race against time, the air heavy with the tension of knowing that their enemy was closing in. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and yet they were still fighting. His comms crackled to life, Harper's voice cutting through the static. "We've reached the extraction point. It's a no-go. They've got it surrounded." Alex didn't have time to respond. His mind was focused solely on the task at hand. The facility they had infiltrated earlier was a dead zone. The Asleel had known they were coming, and now the team was caught in a deadly game of cat and mouse. Their extraction was no longer an option. They had to fight. "Move up," Alex ordered, his voice gruff but commanding. The team fell into formation, weapons raised, eyes scanning every corner. The jungle felt claustrophobic now, like it was closing in around them, but Alex wouldn't let fear consume him. Not now. The team was a well-oiled machine, Harper, the comm strategist, who always kept a cool head under pressure, Miller, the sharpshooter, a quiet man with a deadly precision, and then there was Alex himself, born to lead, his heart still pumping with the pulse of humanity's last hope. "Alex." Harper called again, urgency now in her tone. "We don't have much time." "Give me 5 minutes," he responded, glancing at the thick jungle ahead. They needed to take down the Asleel command center, but it wasn't just about completing the mission anymore. It was about survival. About making sure they didn't leave anything behind that could help the Asleel finish what they'd started. "Understood," Harper said, her voice laced with concern. But she respected him too much to argue. Alex led the way, his boots crunching the damp leaves underfoot, and his hand never leaving the grip of his assault rifle. He could almost feel the Asleel closing in, the weight of their presence pressing down on him like a storm. The alien force had been relentless in their attacks, believing humans to be weak. But the Asleel didn't understand humanity's greatest strength, the will to survive. A sudden rustle to his left snapped him from his thoughts. He motioned for Miller, who immediately took up position on the flank, while Alex crouched low, trying to peer through the thick foliage. His eyes caught a glimpse of movement, figures dressed in the familiar Asleel armor, their angular forms a stark contrast to the natural world around them. "They're moving in," Miller muttered under his breath, adjusting the scope on his sniper rifle. "I can take them out if you give me a clear shot." "No time," Alex growled. "We need to move fast, hit them hard." He signaled for the team to advance. They moved swiftly, ghosting through the jungle with practiced precision, taking cover whenever possible. Each step brought them closer to the heart of the Asleel's encampment. The air felt thicker now, stifling with the scent of rain and impending battle. Alex could hear his team's breath, short, sharp gasps, as they prepared for what was coming. Suddenly, a loud screech split the air, followed by the unmistakable sound of heavy boots crunching through the underbrush. The Asleel were close. "Ready up," Alex said, his voice a low growl of determination. As the first wave of Asleel soldiers appeared through the trees, Alex wasted no time. He raised his rifle and fired, the sharp retort of gunfire cutting through the air. The first soldier crumpled to the ground, but more followed. They were relentless, their weapons blazing with an intensity that mirrored the fury in Alex's chest. "Take cover!" Harper shouted as enemy fire erupted from all directions. Alex dove behind a large tree, the deafening roar of laser blasts sizzling through the air around him. His heart raced, adrenaline pumping through his veins. The Asleel didn't understand. They didn't know what they were up against. The battle erupted around them. Bullets flew, the crackle of energy weapons filling the air, and yet Alex's focus never wavered. He could feel the weight of every decision, every moment that brought them closer to victory, or death. "Cover the flank!" Miller yelled, his voice cutting through the chaos as he took position at the edge of their cover, picking off Asleel soldiers with deadly accuracy. Harper was moving too, her rifle tracking each movement with surgical precision. "I've got your back," she called out to Alex, but there was a sense of desperation in her voice now. The odds were stacked against them, and it was only a matter of time before reinforcements arrived. "Push forward!" Alex shouted, his voice rising above the noise of the battle. They had one chance to end this. One shot to turn the tide in humanity's favor. Together, they surged forward, firing, dodging, and moving with the speed and coordination of a well-trained unit. Each of them carried the weight of the mission, and they were willing to give everything for it. But as they reached the center of the Asleel encampment, Alex's heart dropped. A massive alien structure loomed ahead, its dark metallic surface glinting in the eerie moonlight. It was a weapon. And the Asleel weren't just trying to destroy humanity. They were preparing to end it. The alien structure loomed ahead, an unnatural monolith of steel and alien technology, pulsating with an eerie glow. Alex's mind raced, trying to process the magnitude of what lay before him. The Asleel weren't just planning to destroy humanity, they were preparing to wipe them from existence. "Harper, Miller!" Alex shouted over the comms, his voice tight with urgency. "We need to take that thing down, now." Harper's voice crackled back, her tone grim. "I see it. We don't have the firepower for this. We need to hit the core, take out its power source. Can you get close enough?" Alex didn't hesitate. "We don't have a choice. We go in." His eyes swept over the jungle again. The Asleel forces were swarming, pushing forward with relentless precision. But the only thing that mattered now was reaching that structure and stopping the weapon before it could unleash its destruction. Miller was the first to react, moving swiftly along the ground. He was silent, as always, but his intent was clear. A flick of his hand and his sniper rifle was raised, taking out a few more Asleel soldiers in a series of precise shots. Harper covered the rear, her rifle barking as she took down another wave. "Stay close," Alex ordered, as he sprinted toward the structure, feeling the weight of his team's survival on his shoulders. The jungle seemed to grow darker, the air thick with smoke and the scent of burning vegetation. It felt like the walls were closing in, every rustle of leaves a threat. As they neared the base of the structure, Alex's heart skipped a beat. The Asleel were everywhere, and time was slipping away. "We have to disable it," Alex muttered, grimly assessing the structure. A jagged, crystalline spire rose from the center, surrounded by strange alien markings that seemed to pulse with energy. There were doors, hidden from view, likely leading straight into the heart of the weapons control room. The problem was getting to them without being torn apart. Harper turned to Alex, her eyes hard. "How do you propose we get inside?" Alex scanned their surroundings. His gaze fell on a narrow passage between two large trees, leading toward the structure's entrance. It was their only chance. "We take that route, quick and quiet. Get inside before they can react." Miller was already moving, his sharp eyes scanning for threats. He took the lead, as always, followed closely by Harper. Alex brought up the rear, constantly aware of the distant roar of alien engines and the sound of Asleel soldiers closing in. It was only a matter of time before the Asleel realized what they were doing. But Alex wasn't going to let them stop him. Not when the future of humanity was hanging by a thread. They reached the entrance in minutes. The door was an impenetrable metal wall, but it was nothing compared to the threats they'd faced before. With a swift motion, Alex pulled a grenade from his belt and lobbed it at the door. The explosion was loud, deafening, but the metal twisted, buckled, and gave way. The path was open. Inside was dark, too dark. The air was thick with a strange energy, and Alex felt the power coursing through the walls. It was only a matter of time before the Asleel found them. "On me," Alex whispered, his voice low and commanding. They moved quickly through the corridors, their footsteps muffled by the humming energy that pulsed through the walls. The tension was palpable, each of them knowing what they were walking into. They reached the central chamber. The core of the weapon sat in the center, a massive, glowing crystal encased in a cage of alien metal. The Asleel were ready. They'd anticipated a breach, and as soon as they saw Alex and his team, they opened fire. Alex fired first, his rifle jerking as the shots hit the incoming soldiers. Miller and Harper followed suit, creating a wall of fire that pushed the Asleel back. But they were running out of time. The energy readings spiked. "We've got to destroy it, now!" Harper yelled over the din of gunfire. Alex nodded, pulling a device from his belt. It was a prototype EMP, a last resort. It was their only shot at stopping the weapon. With a steady hand, Alex placed the device against the crystal core and activated it. The glow of the crystal intensified for a moment before it began to flicker, pulsing erratically. The device hummed, sending waves of energy through the structure, short-circuiting the system. The Asleel let out a series of screeches, realizing too late that their weapon was doomed. The explosion that followed rocked the entire base, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. A shock wave of energy rippled through the jungle, knocking Alex and his team off their feet. The air was filled with the blinding light of the explosion, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. When the dust settled, Alex staggered to his feet, his body battered but alive. He could hear the distant cries of the Asleel, retreating as their weapon crumbled into a heap of debris. Harper and Miller were already up, moving toward him. The battle was over. They had won. But there was no time to celebrate. The war was far from finished. The Asleel had underestimated humanity once again, and this was just the beginning. "Let's go home," Alex said, his voice steady but full of the weight of the moment. The jungle, once a place of fear and death, now seemed quieter. But Alex knew that this was only a brief reprieve. The fight was far from over. And humanity would keep fighting.